to that money power, emigrant from Corinth to Tarchanii in Etruria, which, according to Livy, was the Tarquin family. The establishment of a silver standard as a base for monetary issuance might very well have been their reward for their assistance towards raising Servius to the throne. The census, supposedly established by Servius, while being the foundation of the organization of the whole state for defense or aggression, would give that money power a complete picture of the people it was their intention, one way or another, to exploit. In the same manner, the doomsday books of the Middle Ages, while recording for the reference of the king all that in the kingdom was, also made valuable record for the money-creative power which had kings, nobles, ecclesiastics, and the common people groaning under a burden of debt quite impossible to meet, which certainly was one of the main causes of the mood of the English that gave rise to Magna Carta, and of those events which followed until 1290 A.D., when the tax-collecting and money-lending classes, such as had followed the quote-unquote conqueror across the English Channel, were finally evicted. In a similar manner, some 2,500 years later, William III of England, owing his throne to the intrigues of the international bullion brokers at Amsterdam, granted them as reward that which they wanted more than anything on earth, which was the establishment of the legality of an undeterminable amount of abstract money, ledger credit page entry, or paper notes to be based on their gold loans to the state, and the creation of a quote-unquote bank at London from which they might issue this money, known as credit, as loan against real collateral throughout the whole kingdom. This bank was to be given the appearance of a State Department. Sound familiar? Fed Reserve. In this case, such status was obtained by permitting it to be named the Bank of England. By permitting it to be named the Federal Reserve. It's not a bank, and it's not of England. And the Federal Reserve is not federal, and there's no reserve. Valuable byproducts of their extensive public works programs would be: 1. The peasants would leave the land enticed by the money wages offered for work on these projects, and the pleasures and excitement that could be bought in the city with such money wages. There, once the construction boom was over, they formed a leaderless, hungry, and easily embittered quote-unquote proletariat. Boy, does that sound familiar. 2. The same proletariat could be manipulated by the agents of money power as a mob towards such political purposes as such money power might desire. Professor Ure, author of The Origins of Tyranny, ventures as close to the truth in respect to the meaning of a tyranny as any others who have written on the subject, although attributing the rise of the tyrants to money power, he does not define what this money power may be, whether money creative power or just those of considerable possession and treasure. In this omission, he cannot be blamed. Professor Ure, for instance, traces the source of the power of Pisistratus, tyrant of Athens, 561 to 527 BC, according to Herodotus, as being partly from those silver mines in the district in Thrace through which flows the Strymon River, and partly from the Laurian mines in Attica. However, it must be pointed out that a man who apparently was a mining man and lived therefore within that restriction would be unlikely to understand the finer shades of monetary emission. It seems quite reasonable to suppose that the class of persons hidden within the Aramaic-speaking middle classes that permeated the whole Levant and Near East during the first millennium BC, and whose business was money and all that stemmed therefrom, in that they were interfering with that which clearly was a power to be exercised only by the very gods themselves, were scarcely likely to instruct their instrument, Pisistratus, therein. Therefore, it may be concluded, the tyrant rose because he was the one who had found favor with the all-pervading money power of the day. He was not money power itself. In that most of the great public works of the Greek cities had been carried forward by the tyrants is the evidence. For as the secretive money power of today, worldwide in scope, thrives primarily upon government loans directed to purposes of war, and the enormous spending that wars involve, in order to strengthen their outrageous claims against the nations, in ancient days, similar heavy spending had to be devised. Tyrant, therefore, was clearly the front man for the local banker, more than actually being the banker himself. He it was who gave legality to the banker and the activities of that coterie of merchants, traders, and captains who flourished on the banker's financial organization. You're describing the American economy today. And though this They did not understand his connection with those international bullion brokers of the day. These worthy businessmen depended for tiding themselves over difficult periods on that which the banker loaned them as money. Maybe an entry in a ledger transferable to the account of a fellow merchant, visiting captain, or trader in slaves, or other merchandise. They also depended on the banker to be safe custodian for such treasure as came their way. The tyrant was, therefore, either naive or corrupt, the instrument set up by the banker, firstly, towards the legalization of his status, and secondly, towards the removal of that class who might yet challenge his peculiar and secret power, the natural aristocracy of Hellas. Pointed out, a great acropolis, or some other such magnificent public work, with whose construction and financial organization money power was fully conversant, sufficed equally well with war, which, all said and done, with hardy aggressive peoples, could also prove considerably dangerous to themselves or their purposes. So, with the tyrant, we see the force by which Greece, previously living in natural order, was molded to an instrument more suitable to those bankers, private money creative power, who, lurking in the shade as needs they had to, burned with rancor at the natural rulers who but treated them as stewards, although the essence of power for all that lay in their hands for more than such rulers understood. Thus were the simple and industrious and brave Greeks now raised up to be the new vehicle through which the final and destructive purposes of those controlling international bullion and slave trades would be achieved. You could